Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives, a space where we explore collaborative pathways that foster healthy relationships through dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and the courage to examine and expand our own perspectives. I'm your host, José Barzola. Thank you for joining us today. In this episode, we explore the power of peace building through mediation anchored in spirituality. Our guest today is Dr. Jude Antonyappan, who has recently completed her book, Covenant. I had it here
Of
earlier.
mediation.
Sorry,
Of
Covenants
mediation.
of Mediation, Jesus the Mediator. The book approaches the teachings of Jesus through a universal spiritual framework, drawing upon parallels and teachings that speak to shared human values and experiences. Among these foundational teachings are the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. Dr. Antonyappan's work invites us to consider mediation not simply as a process for resolving disputes, but as a deeper practice of healing, self-awareness, reciprocity, cultural understanding, and peace. Just to share some of the chapters that she has shared in advance, the titles, but also we'll be delving in a little bit further during our conversation today. So some of the titles are The Healing Jesus Framework, Beatitudes in the Integration of Spiritual, Emotional, Social, Appreciative, and Abstract Intelligence. Another chapters are on mediation, reciprocity of the healing framework, and identifying the value of internal locus of control and becoming. And another chapter is mediation and peace. Is an angry peace activist an oxymoron? And then another chapter we'll be delving into is components of the teachings of Jesus in constructing cultural competence for peace. These thought-provoking themes challenge us to reflect on an important question: how might spiritual wisdom help us become more effective mediators, peace builders, and human beings? Just want to let folks listening, don't be concerned. This is not just one form of religion or another. Really, I think just give us a chance. I think you'll find some transferable topics and skills that pop up during our conversation that can definitely be applicable to all folks in the spiritual world and other, thoughts as well. I think a lot of it kind of really delves into just the context of critical thinking, which we try to perpetuate here. So, Jude, thank you for joining us today. We're honored to have you with us and look forward to learning more about your journey, the ideas behind your new book. And so as we begin, Dr. Jude, before we discuss your new book, I would really love to could you share a little bit about what inspired you to write this book?
Thank you, Jose. Thank you very much. And in fact, for bringing this important framework to your audience as a foundation of building peace. And I want to add to what you referred to in the context of perhaps perceiving this as a religious approach to mediation. It's not at all. It's very much a universal framework of love. And as I mentioned to you some time ago, that I intend to follow this up with the mediation framework of Buddha, and then Krishna as a mediator, and because these are the religions that I'm familiar with, and possibly, have one of my friends who is proficient in Islam write about that as well. So I see this as a series because in my humble mind and based on being a practicing, Christian Catholic all my life and being raised in a Catholic household, in a nation where less than 2% of the population is Christian and Catholic, now maybe 2.5%. So based on all of those experiences, what I realized is that Jesus's approach to life problems was simply as a human encountering those instances of conflict. And the more I learned about mediation, the more I realized the foundational root causes of conflict in our society, in the international arena. I realized that the framework that Jesus followed to teach was a universal language of love. And so I have been inspired to look at everything I do from that framework, not only because of my, spirituality, but also the more I grew, and now I am in my 60s, the more I realized that I am a spiritual being having a human experience, and that has been said by others as well. But for me, it's not just an intellectual conception. It is a lived-in experience. And I might have mentioned to you before that I had the fortune of meeting Mother Teresa in Calcutta, in her dying, and the home for the dying destitutes. Because Mother Teresa, when she went to Calcutta, she was initially sent by her congregation from Albania to teach upper middle class, daughters of upper middle class families. But she realized this is not what Jesus would have wanted her to do, although there is value in that work. She saw so many left unattended on streets, in the streets of Calcutta, and several who were struggling under poverty, especially those days. And so she went initially begging to the shopkeepers, asking them for something to give to the poor. And they would initially say this, Western nun dressed in an Indian sari. Speaking of cultural competence, she, gave up her habit, the nun's habit, because she was an ordained nun from a congregation, but she gave that and wore a sari. And so they were initially a little bemused and curious, and they kept giving whatever they could. One day, a shopkeeper, spit on the extended hand when she asked something for the poor. So she folded that hand and extended the other hand, said, "That was for me, and now for the poor." And to me, that was a brilliant, quintessential, mediation. And so when I met her, I heard so much about her, and we read about her in schools, and the catechism classes. And I met her because my ex-husband, my children of my, the father of my children, who fathered my children, and our marriage lasted for 13 years. And so he was the one who took me to visit her. He's American and Caucasian. And he said he worked for the dying as a volunteer in Calcutta as a dying destitute home. And he had, many redeeming qualities, and quality of service was one of them. So I said, I want you to meet Mother Teresa, because I was teaching at the University of Delhi when we met, and I was already serving a refugee population, doing research. And he said, you would be amazed by what she does, because you share the spirit that she has. So I went, and I didn't even realize when she entered the room, because I never realized she was that small, right? She's a very physical stature, is very small, and she just walked in with this beatific smile. And it was as if the room was filled with love, and she took my hand, and I was nearly at the point of, weeping, because the whole experience moved me so much. And she said, "Child, wash him pure with your love." And when she told her we are going to get married, and then she said, "But get married in Catholic church," because I was Catholic. And she's, and so we did get married in Catholic church, in ecumenical marriage. And so, it was just an amazing experience. And so I always thought about, all the this adversarial relationship that exists in the system of justice in societies, and the winners and losers. In Mother Teresa's world, there are no winners and losers. Even those who hated her work, she still found something good to say about them. And to being a mediator, and to the mediation process itself, is the sense of universal capacity for looking beyond this immediate circumstance to the person, to the shared interest, not the positions that people take, whether it's negotiation or whether it's mediation. And so to me, that is the point that I've been nurturing. And I wanted to write a book about what is mediation from the perspective of Jesus, the most consequential teacher in my experience, one of the most consequential teachers, Jesus of Nazareth. That's what caused this, inspired me to write this book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you also for premising the fact that you're already thinking about, how to connect not only mediation to the teachings of Jesus as it does with this book, but also Buddha and Islam, um, and it just reminds me so much of like, many times we grow up in certain teachings, and that's all we know, and unless we take the time and there's that thing curiosity where we start learning, whether it's we get introduced to other communities or cultures through food or visiting or just meet a friend who's from somewhere else, you start realizing what I'm getting at is the more we learn about other communities that are not our own, we start realizing, oh, there's some similarities here. Like,
Yes.
and so that's the beauty of it, though, in discovering that. And so, and really, you're just coming at this from, this is what I've learned in my life. So I love how you're bridging your professional and your personal side, because it's so many of us, we talk about that like work-life balance, and that in itself makes it sound as though they're two separate, but it's like, but you're one human being. You're the one trying to manage the two. So just how do you weave it together? I guess that's really so.
Yeah.
Thank you for just being a model for that, and hopefully, as folks are listening, they can think about like, oh, because it is, whether we think about work-life balance, maybe it gives us comfort, but it is scary to think like, oh wait, can it all be in the one? And I always tell folks, well, I think it kind of comes down to like, is your work things that you're passionate about? Or is it something that's going to help you just make money so then you can do things that you're passionate about? Hopefully it's the first one, so that, because,
Absolutely. Yes.
you break down the
Yeah.
amount of time we spend the majority of our time at our job, when we go home, although we may think we spend a lot of time at home, a good portion of that is spent sleeping. And so our awakened moments are times when we're taking in lessons and learning and
Yes.
evolving. So yeah. So you shared a little bit about, the moments that first led you to connect. Well, I guess maybe you talked about Mother Teresa a little bit, but was there a specific thing that led you to the teachings of Jesus with mediation and peace building? Was it that interaction with Mother Teresa, or was it
Well,
something else?
that was the seed, let's say.
Okay, yeah.
But and the more I learned about mediation, and even in mediation, there is like this holy cow attitude, right? There are mediators who are so well experienced and they're so knowledgeable that fresh incoming mediators are looked on as, well, they don't know much, or or not giving opportunities. And there is someone called Vikram, the mediator. I don't know whether you might have seen this. He's in India and he's a lawyer, and he claims that you don't need specific mediation training in order to be able to provide mediation, especially, if you're a lawyer. And I mean, I have my Juris Doctor degree, and, and I am passionate about access to justice and all that. But I took the certificate in negotiation and leadership, and, from Harvard, and I have my PhD in social welfare and all that stuff, right? And so all those accomplishments, and international law and compliance and ethics, but I realized all of that would be valuable only if my attitude, my not my personality. Well, personality is different from my spirit, but my spirit, and everything that stems from the personality, such as internal locus of control, external locus of control, my self-control, that those are all integrated seamlessly with my spiritual work. Only then my mediation can be effective. I do believe that. Ken Clark, whose work I absolutely respect very much, he presented a paper at the same conference, virtually, that I presented at a conference that took place by the Peace Institute in Nigeria. It was, very many academics and peace builders, and they presented and participated. They were members, and Ken Clark said something that all of us have inherently the capacity to mediate. We are born with the capacity to mediate, and I strongly believe that. But that doesn't mean that we do not need the support of a structured system to learn the components of mediation. How do you prepare for mediation? How do you, establish relationship with the parties? How do you tease out the issue? How do you practice active listening? When would you call for a caucus? When would you realize the need for individual meetings with the parties? And how would you help them see beyond the positions that they take to their shared interest and their values? And how would you use the mediation process not simply to resolve a conflict, but to grow from that, to build values, to repair, to recover, to heal, and to develop those sets of skills as almost like muscle memory, so that when the parties have future conflicts, they don't have to run to a mediator. They would be able to solve it because it becomes, find a solution. And if it doesn't work, then seek the help of a mediator. I think it needs to be taught to our children from early on. And my daughter was a peer mediator in school. In UK, they offer peer mediation in schools. But when you have a spiritual background, a spiritual framework like the Jesus's teachings, mediation becomes almost natural to you. That's my experience. I'm not universalizing this, because you learn to give and take. You learn the principle of forgiveness. When my brother and I fought, my mother would say, "Hey, remember what Jesus said, before you start praying, go and make peace with your brother." And, my brother and I would play chess, and I was unfortunately, fortunately better than him. And so most of the time I won, and when I won, he would just one sweep, throw all the men on the, board and run away. And remember, and then not only that, he would run after me to yank my hair, and my mother would, my parents never hit me, or, but definitely not me, maybe my brother sometimes, but, very little, they didn't believe that much in corporal punishment and all that stuff. And so my mother would say, "Absolutely not." And then, and so she would make us sit down and talk about the importance of, right attitude in life and appreciating each other and forgiving each other. And I would say, "Okay, he did that. And now you forgive him. And you have to forgive your brother. Even if he did something to you 7 times, 70 times, you still forgive him." So it becomes like instilled in you, right? And so you grow up with that consciousness. And then when you see this world, and what is distressing is those who claim to have Christian values are encouraging wars. And today is the anniversary of the Ukraine-Russian war. It started in 2022, and thousands of lives have been lost, and hundreds of thousands of lives, and thousands of children have been displaced, and adults maimed, lost their homes, both in both the countries, and now it is escalating. And today, the European leaders are meeting to give $6.1 billion to Ukraine for more to protect themselves against the attacks by Russians. It's not that Ukrainians are not attacking; they are defending themselves, but it is a pointless war. Started as a act of aggression by one nation against the other. So, and us, United States, we are not even in that meeting where European leaders are meeting. And to me, instances like this, my country is not represented in this piece of it. And why is that? And we have a war going on with Iran, and we are starting this most brutal, sanctions. When sanctions are installed, because the negotiations have stalled, and mediation didn't work, and so, but who get affected? 158 children lost their lives in one mistake caused by the bombing. Then during the first few days or weeks of a war with Iran, and so many have lost their life. And so, to me, we are a world in strife, and we are a world in conflict, and we can, none of the religions of any persons engaged in this war preach, go attack somebody else without reason, or, they all emphasize, collaboration, peace, and repairing, and healing, and reconciliation, forgiveness. If reconciliation is possible between among the Tutsis and the Hutus in Rwanda, where the worst form of genocide took place by one tribe against other, I believe reconciliation is possible in every society. We just need the right kind of mediators, informed negotiators, and informed mediators, and who understand culturally what is at stake and who know how to mediate in ethno-religious conflicts. And so, to me, and those who profess to have Christian values and do not engage in good faith mediation, good faith negotiation, are not doing a service, in my humble view, to the faith they profess to, back their actions for war and conflict.
Thank you. And thank you also for, bringing to light the 1 year of Ukraine and Russia war. It's kind of silly, I think, when people call it different things when that's exactly what it is. And as you were mentioning that, I was like, it's really unfortunate that we have all these, I don't want to call it anniversaries, like these, like I wish we could be talking, oh, this is like the 1 year anniversary of like something positive, something that is giving life and joy, not agony and suffrage.
5 year anniversary.
5 years, sorry,
5 years.
5 year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Today is the day. It started in
yeah,
2022. So
yeah,
5 years this war has been
yeah.
going on.
I know.
And
And just because the other day I was, someone was in October, I think will be 1 year with Iran.
yeah.
So it's just wild that we have these, yeah. Uh, so thank you for bringing, the current issues and it's unfortunate that you don't really hear much about it, but that's uh, so it's good to keep the stories alive to remind folks that hey, it's still happening. It hasn't gone
Yes.
away just because you don't hear about it.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
now, uh, we talking a little bit about describing Jesus as the mediator. What do you mean by that? Like, are there certain characteristics or practices that make his teachings relevant to mediation today?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a mediator is someone who looks at the issues and looks at the individuals, the parties, with empathetic understanding and respect, and fundamentally believes in the capacity of the parties to change themselves, to solve their, problems, and to find resolution to their conflict. If there are so many instances in the Bible, in Jesus' teachings, this happens. One is when someone who wanted to trick him and asked because he wanted Jesus to get in trouble by saying, "Oh, Jesus advocates." Not paying taxes. So he brought a coin and he showed it to Jesus. I'm paraphrasing, not, the actual, yeah. And so he says, "Oh, Jesus, you are revered as a teacher who speaks the truth and, without taking anybody's sides. Should we pay, taxes to Caesar?" And so Jesus will bring the coin. And so he gives the coin that to man who wants to trick him said, "Whose image is on it?" And it was probably Tiberius, judging by the time that Jesus lived in. And when this happened in the last 3 years of his, mediation ministry, loving universal love work, and the man answers, "It is Caesar's." And Jesus quietly said, "Give to Caesar what you owe to Jesus, and give to God what you owe to God." And so it's as simple as that. And he didn't go on a long lecture and say, "Hey man, you're trying to trick me into get me into trouble with the law, and and that is not nice." And didn't preach it. He didn't say any of that. He just said very quietly. And then they brought him, say to again to trick him. Let's say now he cannot escape this, and they brought towards him and almost dragged a woman whom they accused of adultery. And she, was so ashamed, she bent her head and she was in her hair. And so he asked for the reasons, and they explained to her that she's accused of adultery and she should be stoned to death. And so he bent down quietly and started writing on the sand. And he wrote, those among you who hasn't committed a sin may cast the first stone, right? And so no one moved. And then he bent down again and wrote on the sand again. He wrote the same thing. Then quietly, everyone started walking. He didn't stop them and ask, "Why are you leaving?" And so finally he raised his head from the sand, and only the woman was there. And he asked, "Where did they all go?" And she wept and said she left. They all left because he just helped them understand that there is no one who is, so sinless that they could commit another sin of throwing stones at a woman who has committed a sin in their cultural context, right? Of course, we need to understand the cultural context. So he was, protecting her, and documenting and affirming her humanity, her respect, her need for respect, her right, exactly the same way as they affirmed their respect, the right for their right, into believe in their cultural values. So he was mediating a very difficult situation, in a teaching that was rooted in my mind, integrative intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence. He didn't get all, emotional about it, and he integrated the cultural context into the situation. And so a good mediator, looks at a circumstance, especially in ethno-religious conflict and negotiation. What are the cultural issues at stake? Under what conditions the negotiating parties would absolutely not talk to each other? What is that red line that they will not cross? And what are the nuances of the expressions that they're using here? This is why it's so important to have a good interpreter if the negotiators don't speak the language of the parties, or one of the parties or both the parties. So, and most importantly, to have a sense of humility, saying, "I may be the mediator, but they have lived with the situation." Here, Jesus understood that, this woman who has been dragged so pitilessly is the one living with that, whatever caused her to what they're accusing her of. He didn't even ask her, what she has been doing and all that. He just said, "Go, don't do this anymore," or something to that effect. And so, or don't sin anymore. And so, I mean, so we can enter into a larger context of sin, what we consider as sinful. And it's, is avarice a sin, sorry. Christ talked about, it's difficult for a rich man. It's more difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of understanding, or, I don't want to use the word heaven, but that's the word Jesus used. I think kingdom of universal understanding, universal love, than for a rich man, than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. How can a camel go through? It's as impossible for someone who is running after money and who is destroying families, who is taking safety nets of children who should be having that food to be able to have lunch and breakfast at school so they can listen and learn in schools with a nourished body, or who is taking away healthcare from older persons. For that kind of person to focus on avarice and, just greed and hoarding and, using one's position to accumulate money, all of those, and to, claim Christian leadership while doing all that is, we need to, again, we cannot judge anyone, but we need to look at these and say, why are our children not having food in the wealthiest country in the world? And why have we taken away, stopped the USAID, funds that was giving us, United States, the soft power that we needed and very helpful for our own corporations, but at the same time helping hundreds of millions worldwide to stay away from hunger, to protect their health care, to engage in reproductive health, to engage in, you know, uh, um, a basic sanitation, to have clean water, to have access to, communicable disease prevention mechanisms. And so I think we ought to ask ourselves if we are truly spiritual people having a human experience, and that Christ talked about it. He said, "Flesh is not who you are. Flesh is
Mm,
nothing. It's the spirit. You are people of spirit. You're spirit.
yeah.
You're not flesh." And so, but a mediator needs to be, and I would say Christ is a mediator because he mediated between universal truths and the
Mm,
practice of the humanity, even during his time,
yeah.
which are still very relevant. And that's why I think Christ as a quintessential mediator. And I could say the same thing about Buddha, so many things. Buddha looked for equanimity, homeostasis, and everything. And I've studied Buddhism because I worked with Tibetan refugees, and there, and helped them with community development and some of the problems in one small community in Delhi. And that's how I met my ex-husband, my children's father. He was working with them, and and when he came to University of Delhi, asked my head of the department, then I would need the help of a faculty member to continue the community development I do with the Tibetan refugees here. Their community was close to campus. So,
Mm,
because I was already working, doing research with Afghan and Iranian refugees, my head of the department referred me, and so that's how we met. And he came to United States, and after a year, he came back and he proposed, and then we got married. Before that, we went and met Mother Teresa, and so and then we got married, and then I gave birth to my three amazing, extraordinary children, my daughter and two sons, and after 13 years, because it wasn't in the
wonderful
best interest
journey.
of my children, we
Right.
amicably, divorced. Yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your insights. I know one of the things we always, in this world of ADR or alternative dispute resolution or mediation, folks always think about like talk about like conflict resolution and just kind of get stuck on that sometimes. And so I know we're talking a lot about like healing here. So I
Mhm.
wonder, what do you hope readers understand about the difference between simply just resolving a conflict as opposed to like experiencing genuine healing? Which I look at healing as, sometimes we talk about it as like conflict transformation. Um, and so, yeah, just wondering what do you hope
Oh, absolutely.
folks listening
Yeah,
in, like,
yeah.
how do you distinguish between the two? Um,
The healing and alternative
yeah,
dispute resolution, yes.
yeah,
I mean, because remember, alternative dispute resolution sort of came as a side product, as a byproduct of the court system initially, in some ways. Although there have been mediation existing in Indian villages,
yeah.
if you go there, you would see the village panchayats and village communities and sitting under a banyan tree and resolving community conflicts. And my own father would, like, they would bring issues, village issues when I was small and seeing them. So conflict resolution has been taking place, on an informal level under the leadership of, community leaders, sometimes clergy, but the profession itself as a mediator got recognized when the court system recognized, understood this as a way of providing access to justice in a non-adversarial way, in a way that could be helpful for the parties to arrive at an agreement that they would, mutually respect and hold on to and abide by it. In arbitration, a neutral arbiter, comes up with an agreement, and after talking, so in the justice system, it is almost like negotiation, mediation, arbitration, and then litigation, right? And even in arbitration, and throughout this process, the potential for litigation may be The flag may be waved as now and then, saying if people don't come to an agreement, and then they would go to litigation, which costs more resources and more winners and losers. So, and the Jesus framework is healing because there are no winners and losers in Jesus's framework. It's all win-win, right? In our court system, in the justice system, there is this misconception that someone has to win and someone has to lose. And so we understand the justice system primarily through the lens of retribution and not so much as restoring justice to the parties. So restorative justice, of course, focuses on that is a movement that is coming along. And the International Institute of Restorative Justice in Bethlehem, Philadelphia, where I attended an international conference many years ago and, took some of their training and found it to be phenomenal, particularly in the school system, can be very, very effective. And in the incarceration system, when parties ask for instance, victim offender dialogue, mediation dialogue, or when they ask for restorative justice, practitioners to help them heal both the victim, it does not mean that the person who caused the harm is not going to evade accountability. They would still be held accountable for their actions, but there is healing. We often forget that the perpetrator is also suffering. They would not have committed sometimes the heinous crimes if they were not suffering, if they were not also not, fixed, sort of stuck in some parts of their life where they're not able to overcome the trauma, maybe, or their responses to life's instances. So, the healing framework that Jesus uses, where it is foundationally respected on winning and winning, and that is possible. When we use, for instance, if you have first repair the situation. When there are other countries where there are, for instance, instead of sending someone to incarceration, they tell them, well, go do work for this family that you harmed for 6 weeks, or repair something that they've lost, and you take accountability, and at the same time you get to heal. And then a sense of empowerment, that you are empowering by acknowledging the humanity of the person, no matter how miserable that person is, no matter how unlawful they have been, and how viciously mean and stupid and their actions have been. We believe in the capacity of each person to change at some level or the other. And when I'm working on also, as I told you, Buddha and the mediator, and just by being who you are, the mediator, who is willing to suspend judgment and listen actively, respectfully. As Christ said, do not judge, and you shall not be judged, right? He was big on not judging. And he was a teacher who was like Buddha, and Buddha said, his whole realization came. He said, when he listened to someone on the passing by this, a stream, the music teacher telling his student, don't tie the strings, don't tighten it too much, it will break. And don't let it lay flat too much, it won't play. And so just the right amount. So the mediator has to be that, non-judgmental person. We focus on neutrality, but I would say, hold on now. Neutrality can help us suspend our capacity for empathy sometimes. It's because we want to have cognitive empathy and affective empathy in a way that helps the person restore a modicum of respect to themselves when the entire society has castigated them as the worst person, as a criminal. That doesn't mean that they haven't engaged in unlawful conduct, that their action was not criminal. Of course it was criminal, it was unlawful conduct. But how do we restore that person, help them rehabilitate? And that was Jesus's framework, repair, empowerment and trust, and believe in the capacity of the person to change. And Jesus, and just like Jesus, Buddha was encountered by this really evil, what one could only consider as evil person who had already took the lives of 99 persons, and he was looking for the 100th person, and Buddha happened to be the 100th person, and that person saw him, and immediately by his presence alone had such a transformation that became a complete, listener of Buddha's teachings. And I'm not even describing it as beautifully as it is described in Buddha's, you know, scripture, but it is something that is something for all of us to consider, right? Mediators. How do we become? I am definitely far from reaching that stage, but that's my goal. That's my aim. I want to be reaching a state internally through my internal locus of control and by my self-control that I can be that person, a personification of a universal form of love, right? And that I see the person inside every member of the party to a negotiation or mediation. So yeah, that is the framework, and then after you've empowered, you've trusted, you've listened, you've identified and validated their humanity, you help them heal, and then becomes reconciliation, and then becomes the resources for further growth and further continued transformation. I mean, of course, as you know, there are several types of mediation. We have facilitating mediation, we have evaluative mediation, we have transformative mediation. I tend to value transformative mediation more. And of course, every situation calls for different kinds of mediation. And so, but transformative mediation is a process of transformation, which Jesus calls us being born again. And I would love to narrate this brief instance where Jesus meets Nicodemus, a man called Nicodemus, and Jesus says, "You need to be born of the Spirit." And Nicodemus says, "Oh, how can we be reborn? I am a big man. Do you want me to go into my mother's womb again and be reborn?" And Jesus says, "No, no, I'm not talking of the birth of flesh. I'm talking of the birth of spirit. You cannot understand the teachings, what I'm telling you, unless you're reborn." Now, there are Christians who consider themselves reborn again and, isolate themselves and judges. Not all of them. There are many who are reborn and transformed from so many things, from addiction and all of that. And there are many forms of treatment for addiction uses that transformative approach to healing. I bow before all of them because it's hard work and takes a long time. But as in every, approach, there are those who use the approach for their own benefit too. And so, it's important to be, cognizant of that and to still not judge anyone, by the same token. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you also for sharing a little bit about I think the Healing Jesus framework that is referenced in your chapter. Now, to move on to another chapter, you mentioned the mediation, reciprocity, internal locus of control. You stated that you discussed the importance of internal locus of control. And I think, as I ask you these questions, I kind of know where it might go, but I do want the audience to also just hear in case they may have not. So why is this concept particularly important for someone seeking healing or transformation, would you say?
Oh, very much. I mean, they have done studies. We have internal locus of control and external
Yeah.
locus of control. Beings, being meaning us, human beings, who are focused on, their own they believe that they control what their life is going to manifest, that they are responsible for their, not only for their destiny or for their actualization, and they need to take the right effort and right steps at the right amount of time. But studies that have done by physicians, for instance, and health scientists who are focused on health, say internal locus of control combined with self-control contribute to positive outcomes towards good health practices. Because when you believe I am responsible for my health, because I believe that, so I do yoga, I do Tai Chi, I am primarily a pescatarian, even that, and I eat, focus on eating well, and, and have cultivated those habits in my children. But sometimes, do I want chocolate or coffee? Coffee is my great addiction, and so that's why I'm saying I don't use any drugs, I don't drink, and all of that. But if I have had 2 cups of coffee already, and I want to have a third cup in the afternoon or evening, and I know having caffeine, like maybe a few hours before bed, would keep me awake, and I want to have a good, at least a minimum of 7 hours of sleep. So I have to have the self-control and to know myself and to have that belief. Yes, I can have a coffee, and then I can say live with not going to sleep until beyond an hour of my normal bedtime, and that messes with my entire circadian rhythm, and and my biological clock and all of that stuff. So when we have that internal locus of control as mediators, for instance, not judging our bodies based on how they look, how they talk, what they have done, then we are following the Jesus framework. Jesus said, do not judge based on external appearances, because those are of the flesh. Consider what is inside, the spirit inside the person. Again, I'm paraphrasing because Jesus' teachings are so far beautiful, and I wanted to write the teachings, but anyone who is interested in reading the Bible can go and look for it. And one of the reasons also why I didn't want to, quote exactly and read from the Bible is I didn't want to be seen like, preaching the Bible on your show. And so, yeah, so it's all about peace. And so as a mediator, when we can have that internal locus of control, when someone, is shabbily dressed, and is that a disrespect for the mediation process? Well, one of my, a fellow mediators thought so, and so, or that it was disrespectful to the other party. And so, do we even have the, what shall I say, right to have those kind of expectations of the parties? First of all, do we even understand conflicts disrupt people's lives? Conflict it's as normal in our life, everyday life, but people do not like conflict. All of us like to avoid them because it means extra expenditure of our energy, especially in this modern world when we have so many responsibilities. So when people come to mediation, they may not be in their best form, whether physically, in their physical appearance, or in their capacity to communicate effectively. It's our job to make them feel comfortable, by their active listening, by the maybe priming our environment for positive communication, and so reminding them of the value of the worldview that they hold without diminishing them. Doesn't mean that we have to support them in their understanding of illegality or legality, and not somehow coming across as someone who knows everything, but to have that humility. And so not even to tell them what your qualifications are. I participated in a training for future lawyers. We were giving a training internationally, and very small group, and law students, and it's virtual. And one of the fellow trainer, also someone who has a PhD, and came and announced that she has a PhD, and she's not just someone who just knows some mediation. She has a PhD in psychology, as if that would help her solve all. I mean, and so I was like, is this the way we approach, people whose lives are disrupted? Is this the way we train future mediators who are going to work with individuals whose lives are disrupted by conflict? conflict can be in so many forms. It can be something small as, for the remedy that they're seeking or the agreement that they want, something as a small financial settlement, and to so many things like family law and, child custody and how they share that and how they assume the economic responsibilities in our own lives. We make so many decisions where we are arriving at mediating with ourselves. What are the responsibilities I'm capable of assuming and discharging? Can I discharge them with honor? And what are the financial responsibilities that I raise my children with the consciousness of? When we are parents of children, and I raise my children mostly as a single mom, and then do I have responsibility to nurture their interest? And just because I wasn't before interested in sports, team sports, should I say, oh, it's to, maybe they'll get, I made it a point to become well versed in baseball and, football and basketball. And so still sit yesterday we watched the Red Sox, game. And so they were playing the San Francisco Giants and they, swept the series, all the three games. And it was at Fenway, Boston. And so the point I'm making is, when we assume parental responsibility, we have to prioritize it. So, and that is a mediation that we do with ourselves. Can I do this by my own self? And what are the support systems that I seek? And I was fortunate enough to have support system from, my community, from my friends for a few years. And so it's kind of, understood. And I think Jesus understood it. Life is a mediation, process of mediation. And we all need internal resources. And a principal internal resources is internal locus of control and self-control. One of my students told me when we were talking about, the child welfare system, that she was a Title IV-E student, what we call a Title IV-E student. They get a stipend from Title IV-E, government program, and they will work in the child welfare system. And the more she sees clients, the more she realizes that yes, the system messes up sometimes, and removes children who should never have been removed from families and, not fully equipped to deal with all the requirements, resource requirements. But there are individuals, adults, who should have never had children, who do not understand the responsibility of parenting. But then I was asking, do we do a good job of explaining that to our children as they are approaching teenage years in school, what it involves? And there was a time when teenage pregnancy was a problem in United States and California. And so what are the programs, we have for them to understand and the concept of human sexuality and, and their reproductive system and the resources and parental, responsibility. And so there was this movement called, well, they take a vow to remain as virgins until they get married. And then they realized there was a group of, someone did a study of those, and they came out with a conclusion, my goodness, they have, sexually transmitted diseases because they did refrain from having intercourse, but that was their understanding of refraining from sex, but they had other forms. So how well prepared we are to educate our future generations, as parents, as teachers, as community, as extended family members. All of this is extremely important, and to teach our children the importance of respecting their peers, if our sons, to respect their fellow peers who are girls as equal, only endowed with the intelligence, capacity, and to respect their personal space, to respect their boundaries, and to our daughters to do the same thing with, young men whom they are with, to respect their boundaries and to understand what it involves. I mean, we are the most complex beings, human beings. And I am convinced, I've always been, that spiritual intelligence is an integral part of growing up. Sexual intelligence is an intelligent part of growing up. And the healing framework would give these if we have cultivate emotional intelligence, if we cultivate, social intelligence, if we cultivate kinesthetic intelligence in our children, music intelligence, because music calms the soul. It is a different language for individual children to listen to. I used to sing to my children every day before they go to bed. And when my grandkids were here when my daughter and grandkids were here last week, I still did the same thing. I sang to them. I sang in Sanskrit and I sang in Latin because when I was growing up, it was all in Latin. The Mass was in Latin. Only later it was vernacular. But now we have gone back to Latin. So, in the Mass, EWTN Mass that I watch, part of it is in Latin. And they send the booklet for like my children who didn't have the prospect of growing up when Latin was the prayer form of language used for prayer. EWTN will send a booklet to explain that part of the Mass, which is in Latin, and because it evokes a certain kind of feeling in us, which is, I'm not saying everybody should go and pray in Latin, not at all. I'm just saying there are various forms in which we can pray and cultivate spiritual intelligence through service, and Beatitudes, my favorite part. And so, and Christ saying, oh, feed the hungry and quench the thirst who are in need of water, and clothe the naked, and whoever sees their nakedness sees me in them. And that was a hymn that my favorite hymn, and just, whoever does this to the least of my brethren, he does that unto me. And so, and Mother Teresa said, she always said, whenever, even when she got the Nobel Prize, where she would say something beautiful for God, something beautiful. And she said, in fact, I am doing it because I'm so selfish. I like to do this. That's what she would say. So that kind of humility from, who is now canonized, and, who was pure love, who represented that universal love, and that, I read about in Jesus framework. To me, that is, mediators could be a mediators framework, and likewise, the Buddha's framework could be a mediators framework, or Islam, or Sufism, and so many different forms. There is Baha'i religion has of the Islam talks a lot, and the Prophet himself talked about so many important ways of not hurting others, and so sometimes it's misinterpreted, yeah, and so yeah. And Hinduism, of course, Krishna, and so many, the Vedantas and Upanishads are full of, so many teachings that I can talk for days, in fact, about the importance of framework for justice, and the framework for mediating, and, unity and peace and all of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughtful words and reflections, and how you kind of connected the personal and professional, as we started earlier. One of the things you mentioned early on is that a question. So one of your chapter titles asks a provocative question: is an angry peace activist an oxymoron? And I just wondered what inspired that question for you.
Because, I should start by saying, I mean, there have been so many reactionary movements to society's injustices, right? And then we realize, wow, oh, we messed up again. And so, like, a good example is, for instance, what happened in Germany, right? After the Nazis took over, they engaged in this horrendous deception, and, genocide, and the Holocaust, where 6 million, members of the Jewish community were brutally robbed of their lives, and families desecrated, their properties taken, all of that. And you can say the same thing about slavery, and and you could say the same thing about Native American, population, who went through that different gradations and different levels, and with the different communities. But human suffering is suffering, right? So in Germany, I started saying, those who experience that, and then when the allies, United States and UK and Soviet Union, when they got together, they had their negotiations and all that. Then, of course, Germany was divided into West Germany and East Germany, and West Germany was a capitalist form, or with the regulated capitalism, we should say, and free democracy, and many who moved to East Germany believed because they wanted to escape the horrors of Nazism, fascism, and they believed that East Germany, because they believed in a very organized form of government with egalitarianism, that they could escape that. But they realized that in order for them to have that, they had to have almost totalitarianism. The Stasi, the East German police, at that time, in order to control the population, and they had this big wall, wouldn't allow people to cross except with permissions, and between East Germany and West Germany, that they would sort of squeeze the people more and more to, force them to abide by the principles and the totalitarianism that they wanted them to be. So they encouraged family members to report on each other. They encouraged friends to report on each other. They imprisoned innocent people. They did everything, almost everything that the members of the East German community didn't expect them to. And so many of them, when East Germany and West Germany, when the wall was removed, and when they came together, was shocked to realize that there was information on their family maintained by the Stasi. The Stasi had miles and miles of record, which they tried to destroy when they realized, my God, the wall is going to come down. Germany is going to unite. And they couldn't destroy them. And, they still had even, the records that they were trying to pour water on, and, baskets and baskets of them. Because I did my, period of Fulbright in Germany, I was able to, we were taken a tour of the Stasi headquarters. And so, I saw all that. And I also, during my international law, I was in Krakow. And so went to, Auschwitz and Birkenau, and what I saw in Auschwitz was so shocking of the capacity for human depravity. I couldn't bring myself to go into Birkenau, so I told my fellow, members of my team, "You go ahead, I'll just wait there." And there was a small bookshop, and I bought some books written by Polish writers who were the first ones that the Nazis, Polish resistance, tortured and, took their life off and all that. Anyway, so, but the point is, now we have come a full circle. There is a resurgent Nazi movement. In Germany, every child should learn about Holocaust. It's a required reading for them, a required education, so that we would never repeat that. In fact, there, processes absolute transparency in everything possible. But many members of former East German, I shouldn't say many, a few members of former East German community are now the ones who are supporting in the nascent fascist movement. So the point being, when you change from one system to other system in anger, without finding the root cause of the anger, you just fall back to the same conflict, same oppression, same division, same, need for power. That's the thing. So I am saying an angry peace activist is an oxymoron, because if you want peace, you cannot have anger. That's my question. But some might say, well, you need anger because sometimes legitimate anger is a requirement. That's why human beings are given anger. And so I go back to the same thing, like what Mother Teresa said, when she extended the hand, something for the poor, and the man spit on her hand, right? That is, she could have got, that is such a violation of her personal space. But she was invading his space too by begging or for the poor, although it's not for her. But she folded that hand and she used the other hand and said, no, that was for the poor, now for that was for me, and now for the poor. That is a different kind of dealing with conflict. That is a peaceful form of saying it. Like one of my, I have had this too, but I don't want to go into detail. But one of my, fellow peers, senior faculty members, when I first started teaching in California, whom I respected very much, and she said one day. And she's a very well-respected, professor. One day, a student got up and said, use the F word, And I've had students very rarely, but most of my students also like respected me, and like I respected them as persons and all that. And so, and she said, "Okay, I see a lot of anger there. Let's talk about it." That's what she said. And so, and I learned that from her. I see a lot of anger there. And so it makes no sense when drivers on the road or, showing the middle finger or, and yelling words of hate or, honking the horn.
No,
And
I was going to say one of the things I'm hearing is so as folks may be listening, um, it's a perspective on the level of anger.
yeah,
Because I think what I'm hearing is if it's angry that you're just like so heated where you're being irrational, you can't kind of get your thoughts in focus. Okay, that there's no space for you to be able to process like peace. But I think because actually you gave some really good points as far as like being angry at injustices, being angry at people being just the wars, the genocide that's happening. Um, that I think is a form of peace. The fact that you have those thoughts is supposed to be like, oh well, it doesn't impact me. You know, so I think part of the what you're getting at is also like, what do you do with that though, right? Because I think the peace aspect of it is the actionable aspect of it is okay, there are these situations that you're frustrated about. Well, what can you do by yourself, collectively, with a group of folks in your community
absolutely.
to
Yeah,
create change? That's
yeah.
where the peace aspect comes in.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we have
Yeah.
good examples, if I may interrupt, Jose,
Yeah.
before I
No, go
forget
right ahead. Go
again.
right ahead. Yeah,
And
thank
we
you.
have excellent examples for that. Gandhi, for instance, Gandhiji in India, was able to, through a non-violent movement that he emphasized the absence of anger by his own behavior, but some in his movement did, of course, get angry, and was able to get freedom from an empire, right, through the nonviolent movement. And Reverend King, used the same nonviolent principles, and was able to, fight consequences of racism, the most entrenched, hateful form of racism, and get, members whose labor was stolen for such a period of time, free, and who were oppressed and who were lynched, and all of those things. He was able to lead them through a non-violent, even when they were beaten, when dogs were leashed on them. He achieved all that. So we have examples of peaceful peace activists. And I can, since this is about Jesus the mediator, one of the examples I give in my book is what Jesus talked about. He said, no shepherd would, jump over the fence or, break the gate. I'm again paraphrasing, in order to reach his sheep, because he only a thief or a robber would do that. A shepherd's voice is recognized by his sheep. So the gatekeeper would open the gate for the shepherd, and shepherd would go in, and he would, take the sheep out, and he would lead them, and he would protect them and from the wolf. And they know that, and they would listen to his voice. And so that is the example he used. But a good shepherd would lay down his life for his sheep. But I want to, because this is critical thinking based session. You and I love critical thinking too. Critical thinking, I believe universal love is the highest form of critical thinking, highest form of creative thinking. And so anyway, what about, someone who might argue, well, there are shepherds who protect the sheep from the wolf so that they can be fattened up and they can be slaughtered as meat for their, wool. And so the sheep may be listening to the shepherd, unaware, or actually it's this guy who is going to slaughter them. And so should they be angry at him? you know, I'm going to leave that question for the readers for the listeners to, come up with. So again, these are relative questions, right? And so some might ask, well, do people eat sheep? Yes, that's lamb. Lamb meat is eaten, and sheep, fully grown sheep is meat is known as mutton, and many parts of Asia and Middle East, and it's it just needs to be cooked for a long time. I've never eaten it, but I know some of my own family members, Catholics who would eat that. And, mutton
Yeah.
biryani is a cherished South Indian dish.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up some really good points of like, where do we draw the line?
Yeah,
And sometimes it just kind of comes down to the values. Also, I think it just sometimes, the fact that beef is cow, but they don't call it cow when you're buying it. They call it
yeah,
beef. So it's
exactly.
like, oh, I'm buying pork, not pig.
Yeah,
I guess chicken's the only one that's like
yeah,
called the same
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
But even then, like, we how many folks are like, oh, I'm gonna get some scrambled eggs, and it's like, well, you know what those are. There's like baby chickens, and or even
They
when it
could
comes
have
to
the,
like,
yeah, potential for life. Yes.
or sometimes we strive to be more conscientious. So like, oh, we're just pescatarians, but like, how does that make it any better? It's like, so I guess it's one of those conversations that I think for the most part, a lot of folks hopefully can have that. I mean, obviously there's so much like cultural embedded into like how you were upbringing, and so yeah, it's just one of those conversations I think folks should think about having about, and I think part of it also, like, even for me, like, I grew up with everything, but, I probably lean away from some of those types of meats as I've gotten older because you notice, oh, you get groggy, you don't feel it as great. Like, so you adapt. And partly also, like, you realize, oh, this is a healthier way of like nurturing your body and your soul. So, um, but no, thank you for that. I want to just be conscientious of time here. I would just love
Yeah.
to kind of for our listeners, what's the most surprising thing you discovered about yourself while writing Jesus the Mediator? Uh, yeah, just wondering if, because I know anytime I go on a writing journey, or any kind of journey of reflection, because this I feel like it's you just written like multiple chapter reflection. Uh, you come out of it with some enlightenment, hopefully, or some like, oh, I never thought about that. You're a little different. So yeah, just wondering what you'd be comfortable sharing.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want this to be taken by the listeners as, in any sort of conflictive way. I realize that there are a lot of contradictions in the Jesus framework too. And so a lot of contradictions if I can go delve deep into it.
Yeah,
And, not forget the Old Testament, not even the Old Testament, just the four Gospels, and just Jesus's teachings as reported. And and even the timing that the authors of the, Mark, Luke, Matthew, and John report as some of the events happening. Some events are described by the Mark, Luke, and Matthew as happening in the beginning of Jesus's 3 year ministry. And so other and some as latter part. So but biblical scholars who are amazing, who have so much knowledge are working on that. But in my view, maybe they are not contradictions. Maybe they are contradictions to my limited understanding, but that's what I've realized. But if you ask someone like my mom, who was a devout Catholic, who really lived her life as, she was the one who would like give anything anybody asked her. And so I told you the story of, yeah, right. Yeah. And she literally lived her life, but she was a little bit, proud of her principle to living. So, and so, and I mean, she, she's faultless in so many other ways. And so I don't know whether even I have the right to say that, but bless her soul. And, but she taught me how to love. She gave this unconditional love. And to me, if her faith helped her that, then, to me, that's sufficient. And I have passed that on to my children, and my children will say, and so when they hope, and my daughter is an amazing mom to her two daughters, my granddaughters. She absolutely loves them. And her coworkers ask her, I believe, why are you so obsessed with your children? And she's like, no, that's the only way to be because I learned from the best. And so, so that's what she's. So anyway, yeah. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
think
That's
that
one thing I
that's
learned, and the
yeah.
contradictions. And the other
No, I
thing is,
love it.
yeah. And so that, uh, you know, I have a
I
lot to learn. Yeah.
I always think about especially us being in whether we're in academia, whether we're producing content that we feel comfortable sharing with the world,
Yeah.
because your book will get published, it will end up, who knows, in libraries, in the classroom, it'll be referenced, whether we do these, talks through these podcast recordings, and it lives on online. I think about like, it's almost like a part of us that we devoted that people can reference. Like you talked about your granddaughters, like future generations can be like, and this is not something we're able to do because our grandparents didn't have this technology available. I mean, maybe they were published, so we might be able to reference some of that. But the
Hmm.
beauty of being able to like, oh wow, this is done. It's really amazing. So
Yeah.
thank you for being so open to sharing, to just connecting. Um, I guess one of my last questions, if you don't mind, and I know we can continue talking, but I want to be respectful. What do you hope readers carry with them after finishing the book?
I would say pay attention, you know,
Uh,
pay attention to your life, pay attention to
mm,
your breath. And we live only maybe in 90, 100 years maximum. If we live out, our average life expectancy in America is now 78.5 years. And so, and but many live to be like 80, 84, 90. And Henry Kissinger lived to be more than 100 years old. And his son said he's amazed by his father's capacity for still working, and he wanted to start a new book and all that stuff. So, and yeah, and two sisters who are 106, just I read about them, and they both are still good friends, and they still look very healthy. And so, anyway, so, but knowing that our lives are short, every breath needs to be paid attention to. Under what space? Is it a breath of love, or is it a breath of, the opposite of it? Or, and how are we paying attention to whom we allow to change the world? I just read yesterday that one of the companies, because we had a podcast on AI, has ordered a huge list of old books, old and rare books. And so the owner got suspicious and checked out, and it is from because they're buying old books and feeding all the information into AI and destroying the books. And so I am like, what else are we destroying? And so pay attention and come together. It's very important for all of us to be together in this. Unity, is everything, not to be sucked up by this polarization, this divisiveness that's ugly, this othering, we are all in it together in this planet. And so peace, it's such a misused word, but peace is not absence of conflict. Peace is, how do we come together to solve conflict in a way that further enriches us, further unites us, further help us grow. I mean, we're talking about data centers, and communities don't want data centers, and there are varying degrees of conflict over that. Well, it helps economy, and no, it destroys the environment, needs more. And now they've come up, let's move data centers offshore. And then the climate activists are saying, well, it's going to warm the water and it's going to, harm the marine life and so many other things, coral reef and
Yes.
environment. And so I think we
It,
ought to
it,
ask ourselves, what do we want in this life?
yeah.
And yeah, and this is one thing I want to, maybe remember, Jose, I told you my younger son is a great fan of Red Sox, and we went, maybe a couple of months ago to Fenway. We have been there before. To Fenway is the Red
Yeah.
Sox ballpark, as you know, in Boston. And so then we were given a tour of that, and then the tour guide said there were all the pictures of the famous players and managers and all that were amazing. But then this is a tree that was planted by I forget who, but 120 years ago, almost at the time, the initial days, and the tree is still there, growing. But all the ball players are gone, the managers are gone, the fans are gone. But the ballpark is there. It's a unique ballpark. I love that place because it's still, they maintain some of the, original elements of it. And the tree is there. And even when we watch it on television, they always show the entrance to Fenway and we see the tree. I see, there's the tree. And I tell myself, remember, all the trees will be here when we are gone. So
Yeah.
let's act accordingly in a way with such respect for our life and the lives of others and cherish everything that's about the life, the love that we share. And so, yeah, absolutely. And so, my granddaughter again, the 4.5 years old, she's brilliant and she wanted to be an astrophysicist. Now she has changed. She wants to be an artist because she draws beautifully, and sketches, and she'll correct me. Amma, that's not, she calls me Amma, which is like Amma, my grandmother, but Amma for short. That is not painting, that is sketching. You have to be absolutely specific in the art activity. You have to say you cannot call painting as sketching or coloring or anything else. And so she said. So we were reading a book when my daughter was staying here, and she about God. They get to pick the a book for the night reading before going to bed, and we were reading about God, and she was saying God is there even when we don't see him. And so I said, yes, Karna, absolutely. And so that was Karna. And then she said, but what if I become an artist and not astrophysicist? Will God be unhappy with me? And so I said, no, God is what you are when you follow the teachings, when you live by the universal principles of love. And that's what God is. No matter, it's like a not God, a person, a person. And my daughter also says, Mama, wherever I was reading the book, it says he refers to God. Say he and she, use both he and she because God could be she too. And so I want them to grow up with that understanding. And I said, yes, absolutely. It was, difficult for me to switch immediately, but she said that's what she does when she reads to them. So the point being that our life is children are growing up with the conception of what is important, and their profession, yes, it's important. Their actualization of potential, that's important. But their spirit, that spiritual nurturing, that spiritual intelligence is what is going to help them mediate their own difficulties and their immediate, family difficulties, community difficulties, and be a force of good. So if our, listeners and everyone and us, if we can be a force of good, none of us are perfect, but keep that as our goal and have this universal framework of love. Love is everything, not, limited love, but this unconditional, universal love, appreciation for our fellow human beings and humanity in general.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. just one of the things that always kind of resonates with me every time I hear about conflict. I think folks sometimes think of, right, it's like peace on one side, conflict on the other, and they forget about the benefits of conflict. We wouldn't be who we are if we hadn't gotten challenged in life, if
Exactly.
we
Yeah.
hadn't been pushed into our discomfort a
Yeah.
little bit and try to grow from those experiences. So, and I think for folks like us who are in this work, I find, yeah, I'm always, every time like a new conflict or situation comes up, I'm like, I have no idea where this journey is going to take me, but I'm kind of excited to see what new things, even if it may seem just similar to something else, no true situation, no two situations are ever truly the same. And so that's the beauty of it, just being able to, uh, I always share like, build tools for your toolkit kind of, or more skills for your toolkit kind of thing. But thank you so much, though. Today's
Thank you.
conversation just really just reminded us that peace building is not only about resolving the conflicts around us, it also invites us to look inward, to examine how we respond to anger, difference, pain, and justice, and to consider the role that healing, self-awareness, spirituality, and cultural understanding can play in transforming our relationships. I know that spirituality can be challenging for some folks, depending upon whatever may be happening in their lives. And it's not as though you need to, we talked about praying today and like how you go about connecting or practicing spirituality. That is a beautiful personal experience for yourself. And for folks listening, don't ever feel as though you need to adhere to
Absolutely.
how
Yeah.
somebody else is doing,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day it is your own personal experience, it is your life.
Precise.
And so
Yes.
Dr. Jude's work definitely challenges to think about also mediation is more than just a process or a set of techniques. It can also be a journey of becoming, one that calls us toward greater responsibility, compassion, possibly peace. I feel like we keep thinking of peace as like, oh, it's very like out of date, and it's unfortunate that we lose the vision of like the power of peace, and because we try to come up with new words, but they don't quite truly ever encompass what peace really
Exactly.
it's just
Yeah.
simple peace. We just want collaboration, community, folks appreciate each other. So thank you for your time, Jude, your wisdom, contributing to just an important perspective to the broader conversation about mediation and peace building. For those listening, thank you so much for your time. We hope this conversation encourages you to reflect on the ways you can contribute to healing and peace in your own relationships, communities, and the world around you. And until next time, this is Peacebuilding Initiatives, exploring ideas, conversations, and collaborative pathways toward building more peaceful and connected communities. Take care and definitely continue building peace. Thank you.
Thank you for your reflection and peace dynamism. Thank you.
Yes.